podcast, Dina Belinkaya and others. But yeah, Alireza is an expert from the black side, so a risky choice. And okay, Robert, a locked structure, another blocked position. But what do you make of this choice? Is this Magnus aiming to strike back quickly?
I was not expecting pawn to a5 and then pawn to a4. This sometimes does happen in these variations, but Magnus, he's playing on the flank. So I tend to enjoy these positions as a commentator. I struggle with them as a player because as black, you need to make this super committal move, pawn to f6, just to try and gain some space for your pieces. There's this nasty pawn on e5 that's stopping a bishop from developing to d6. It was stopping the knight from getting to f6 because the pawn was threatening it. So, David, I know that you've liked yourself a little Caro-Kann in the day. Are you liking Magnus's choice when he might feel like he's ready to strike in game two?
I do quite like Magnus's choice, and the fact that Alireza paused for a little bit also will have been encouraging for Magnus. This line with the black pawn coming to a5 and then a quick break with f6, I call it the Elyanov line because Pavel Elyanov, the Ukrainian grandmaster, he put out some notes. He kind of patented this variation. He really tried to promote it among some of his students as well. So some risk attached, as you mentioned, very risky with black. Look at the kingside pieces, all fast asleep, hibernating. It's winter in Europe after all. Those pieces just kind of staying at home, warm from the cold. But they need to develop at some point. Magnus needs to get them into action, especially since the center is now going to explode, Robert. So from my experience, I've actually had, up until this last move from Alireza, I've had this position before, a lot online in Blitz, and yeah, it's fraught. It's fraught with peril. You really need to be accurate here as well. And Magnus, you can see him on the camera, not entirely comfortable. I wouldn't say this is his style, Robert.
No, because in these types of positions, and you called it the Elyanov line, shout out to Pavel Elyanov, who at his peak was a top 10 player in the world, 2760 FIDE rating. In these types of positions, you often need to make a move like g5, and with your king still in the center, you're asking for trouble. This is not fundamentally sound chess. Remember what Magnus said about Denis Lazovic's play. He said he's so fundamentally sound. He just plays the position. He's not trying to take unnecessary risk. This is a necessary risk in many of these lines just to gain space to help your pieces develop. But David, it's not easy to push a pawn when your king is still in the center and you're opening up even more lines against it.
Yeah, I think Magnus will have known that g5 is maybe the principled thing to do. It's the more consistent thing to do. Once you've said A, push some pawns, you might as well say B and start throwing more pawns forward. But as we mentioned, not his natural instinct, Magnus Carlsen. He wants to have more control. He wants to kind of be the one dictating the pace, minimal risk involved. It feels, Robert, that he's been riled, Magnus. It feels like he's trying to fight firouzja on his turf in these wild, imbalanced positions where firouzja is the one who thrives. Of course, firouzja was saying in his interview just a couple of days ago that he feels Magnus has improved in these more chaotic positions of late, but it is a dangerous strategy. Do you think this is just the tournament situation, Magnus having two lives, feeling kind of more freedom to play in this vein?
2 lives, 2 days off, traveling, maybe losing some of your rhythm. But as Magnus himself said, that even when he was playing, he didn't quite feel the rhythm. He was a bit shaky, at least relative to his lofty standards. So I do think it's the match situation that even if Magnus loses this 4-game match, we should remind all of our viewers that if Alireza takes the first match, there is going to be a reset, a best of 2 then. So Magnus, he does have that extra life. And for Alireza, he's just bringing the battle to the #1 rated player in the world. And it's purely Alireza style so far in this match. And knight g6, justified. But David, I'm already looking at all sorts of variations with trades and this black king in the center, this pawn on e6 that if it remains there can be loose. Optically, I like white's position, and yet the engine says black is doing just fine.
Yeah, and Magnus, I guess we have to trust him. Yes, it's not his type of position, but as long as he can survive this initial stage, emerge, there we go, with all of his pieces intact, developed, they've certainly woken up from their slumber, then, yeah, black might well just be in decent shape. I don't like the look of the black e6 pawn, the backward pawn there, the square in front of it, nice, juicy outpost for white's pieces. But other than that, fundamentally, we mentioned that word earlier, the rest of Magnus's position is quite sound. And yeah, I think it could have been a lot worse. I was fearing for him just 2 or 3 moves ago. Alireza, I didn't really like the fact that he kind of traded off on f6 on black's terms and then retreated his bishop to g3. It felt like he lost a little bit of kind of speed there. Yeah, of course, he's ahead in the match, Alireza. He's the one now who doesn't need to take risks. But yeah, Magnus is opening risky, but potentially justified, Robert.
And that e6 pawn that you are justifiably worried about is so weak that Alireza is willing to double and isolate his pawns in the center just so the pawn loses its defender. Alireza could have taken, and maybe if Magnus doesn't take the bishop first, can take in a future turn, but that would fix Black's pawn structure by putting this pawn on f5. So this backwards pawn is so vulnerable that Alireza is doing everything he can to leave it in place. And David, in the Bullet Chess Championship, Alireza Firouzja beat Magnus, sent him down to the loser's bracket, and then in the loser's bracket final, Magnus did take down Alireza. So these two have history between them. They've exchanged victories. For Magnus Carlsen, he knows that he can take down Alireza, he can land a comeback. But in this position, after the last trade of bishops here, are you seeing any clarity, and does that make you choose a side in this game?
Wow, I was about to say this trade surely favors white. Now the dark squares in the center are under white's gaze, under white's control long term. But then I saw Magnus's last move, and yes, the evaluation bar slightly crept up on the white side, but you can see the outlines of a mating net, Robert. The white king, the open H line. If the black queen, nice, you got there before me. Queen, if it lands on H5, suddenly I will be sweating if I were in white's shoes right now. You see the black knight, black queen combo just creating havoc over there. So pawn to b6, a really slow move from Magnus, but yeah, he's got a well-defined, a clear plan, and we've talked about it before. That is essential in rapid chess. Suddenly Firouzja, it's his turn. I don't really see what white does next. You would love to somehow trade off the queens and just kind of install a knight on the beautiful e5 post, but not right now. Magnus feeling the energy. These last few moves, I quite like the way they've gone for black, despite the evaluation bar.
I love that move b6 because a pawn 3 squares away from a knight dominates that knight. No forward progress for it. It also opens up the 7th rank. That may seem unimportant, but in some future positions, a rook lift and darting over to the king side, there is the making of an attack over here. So for Magnus, I'd probably just bring my queen out. I'm not sure if it belongs on f6 or d6, but the point, and he goes to f6, the point is one that you've made before. This queen, if it can somehow get to the h-file, there will be threats. But for now, this knight on f3, it's too strong. It covers the square. It stops the queen from joining. And your plan, David, here it is. A queen trade. It's time to grind like a grandmaster.
That's right. The plan has been foiled. Really clever play there. I think pragmatic play by Firouzja. And again, tip for everyone at home. Try to work out your opponent's plans, because then it makes your own plans a lot clearer. You sense the danger, you ward it off a mile away. And that's why the queens disappeared. Alireza was scared of getting checkmated. Now a set of rooks have disappeared. I'm slightly surprised Magnus traded on white's terms there. He's happy to go passive for one move with the black rook. But then again, for now, the white knights aren't really jumping forward, and the black king is soon going to try and evict that white rook from behind those enemy lines. Still, I slightly prefer white, Robert. I feel that Firouzja, he's removed all the risk. You mentioned grinding this type of endgame. It's unclear yet who's playing for the win, but loving this knight maneuver. The knight was dominated by the b6 pawn. Alireza, at least he has clear plans of improvement here.
And we see, because of the blue arrow, that black only has one move to keep this relative balance. White is ever so slightly better. This black king would love to get to the f7 square, but then knight g5 checks the king while protecting the rook at the same time. So that king can't enter. You can't take away the g5 square, because then you blunder a knight on g6. So there is a bit of frustration here for Magnus, and it's not just the way he's looking on camera. I'm just trying to work my way through his position that you saw what the computer said. f4 here, not an easy move to play, because white has a weakness, right? Double pawns, we typically don't like those, but you're allowing white to undouble the pawns just to get your knight into the position. And Magnus Carlsen, he makes these tough choices look easy. He gets the exclamation point, and David, I really like that move.
Yeah, really classy touch there from Magnus. It's something we've come to expect from him, and I think with relative confidence we were kind of process of elimination, we were thinking he would find it, but here we go. Rather than allowing the black knight into the game, Firouzja, he doesn't care about double pawns. That's a minor inconvenience. He's just improving the white knights. And the black knights, the counterparts here, Robert, still a bit stuck. if the black g6 knight moves, white's rook enters the 7th rank. We talked about 7th heaven. Suddenly the white rook will sneak behind over to the queen side, some real targets over there. So still the dilemma for Magnus, what to do next. Do you get itchy fingers? Do you start pushing some pawns on the queen side? Or do you just sit and hope that white cannot improve his position? We're talking about grinding. Right now, it's firouzja doing the grinding to the grandmaster himself, Magnus Carlsen.
The grandmaster. Now that is a quality nickname. And Magnus, he chooses to retreat with his knight. Any pawn push on the queen side has a problem. If you ever push the c5, c6 pawn to c5, you drop the b pawn. If you push the b6 pawn to b5, you hand white this juicy outpost on c5. So first things first, let's get the knight back. Black has the bathtub pawn formation from a5 over there to d5. So that is keeping him in this game because white's pieces cannot actually make progress so easily without trading them off. And we have seen a trade of knights. Here's a big question, David. Will you take with the pawn or the knight?
Oof, both are forcing moves. Pawn takes e5 I would look at maybe first because it attacks the black knight and that's the higher value piece. It's very forcing. But the black knight will most likely centralize or hop back to where it came from, g4. And you've committed a lot. Yes, you have a pass pawn with white, but it could potentially be a weakness. Taking with the white knight here, Robert, equally attractive, I've got to say. It's basically a coin toss. Taking with the knight looks like it wins a pawn. Just x-ray vision, like you're pointing out there with the white rook. c6 or b6 pawns will drop. I guess Magnus then will push one of those pawns. I'm not sure which one it's going to be, but maybe b5 here, c5. He's got to push one before it drops. firouzja's asking questions. I've got to say, I'm surprised the evaluation bar is almost in the middle because Magnus, he's on the brink already. If a pawn drops, I think he's lost. I think he's busted.
It's like the first game. This is not my arrow. It's telling us this is the only move for black to really have equality here. But that's not an easy move to play because even rook takes c6. If we start trading off pieces, yes, an a4 pawn is hanging, but this may be hard to visualize. The white knight that takes a rook on c6 will take a pawn on a5 after that. David, to my eyes, this looks like if I didn't have the engine off to the side of the board, I would say that white should have the upper hand here. As you said, c5, that really does not look appealing as the b6 pawn will drop. And b5, I don't fully understand, I'm going to be honest with you, what black had in store after rook takes c6. This was incorrect, but an impossible choice for Magnus.
Yeah, a really tough choice. And I agree with Magnus here that c5 is the more natural move. At least the black rook is smiling. The black rook is happy about this development, that it will land on an open file. But firouzja goes for a race. And, okay, c2 is attacked. Is he going to close that line by planting something on c6, whether a white rook or knight, or blue arrow strikes again, Robert? Pawn to b4, just creating a pass pawn at any cost. And a race begins.
And there's a really important point, an aspect of this position. The black king has no luft, no escape square. So even if black were on the turn, rook takes c2 would not be available, as rook b8 would be a back rank checkmate. So b4, yes, the black pawn could take. White will not even take back. Push the a pawn up, and black doesn't have too many pieces to stop it. The rook on c8 doesn't want to sit passively in the corner. Absolutely not. That may be what's required of it. Typically, you want to stop pass pawns by bringing your rook behind them. But as we just talked about, there's a back rank checkmate to worry about. So David, I'm not sure if Alireza will play b4 here. Knight c6 is extremely tempting. It's a safe move. But if he finds b4, he may knock Magnus out.
It's his type of move, Robert. Okay, he plays knight c6, like you said, equally tempting. b4, I was going to say, he loves the races. He loves the most ambitious moves. And yeah, knight c6. I think if it wasn't for the fact that this looks like it just wins a pawn, then I think Alireza would have found that winning blow. Magnus, we saw him on the camera. Suddenly he's perked up slightly. He was head in hands. He looked despondent. He looked really depressed with his position. But suddenly maybe sensing that he's not completely dead yet. So knight to c6. The question for black is how to react. Both pawns are hit. The d4 pawn, I guess maybe the more edible one, not to allow the black rook to capture on c2. But there will be a reply. He activates the black king. Good endgame technique in general. Knight takes d4, now met by rook to c4 with a double attack. So maybe firouzja just wanting a bit too much control, and understandably so. He's a point up in the match, Robert. But do you feel this missed opportunity will come back to haunt him?
I'm still looking at this with great chances for white. Rook b7 check. The black king can't go forward because of a fork on e7. You can't go back to g8 because of the same fork on e7. So king f8 or king to e8, but now your king is cut off, and especially if you go king f8. Knight takes d4, comes with knight e6 check next, winning the g7 pawn. So, David, this is again a position I'm like, get away, computer evaluation. This is not how the players are looking at this. Magnus, he is desperately trying to find a way to survive, and that survival may require him to lose a g7 pawn. And, David, I think we could say as commentators that is an unpleasant decision to have to make.
Really unpleasant. And you mentioned what's going through the players' minds, Robert. I think Magnus, in his mind, it's a 2-result position. He knows if he plays really, really well, defends resolutely, tenaciously, fights for his life, maybe he gets a draw. But I think he's not even trying to win this game anymore. He knows he's on the back foot. The Black King's on the back rank. And that pawn has disappeared. White's temporarily a pawn up. Black regains it, but the rook is so far offside. And Robert the Prophet, the g7 pawn falls as well. Firouzja is a pawn to the good, and he's the only one who can win this game, barring a miracle. It's just about whether it's enough. This extra pawn, it is doubled, after all, on the g-file. Definitely great chances, though, for White.
I'd be very curious if someone could put this position in the engine with the pawn on f3 rather than g3. White probably just is winning the game. But now the Black Knight has too many access points. e4 will check the king, hit the g3 pawn, and the c3 pawn for good measure. If White is forced to defend the pawn this way, this is actually a pin, not a typical pin that we see, but knight e4 check, taking a pawn on c3 may be available for Black. So what a defense here from Magnus, bringing his king away from his pawns just because he has this lovely tactic at the end to scoop up a c3 pawn if the white rook touches down on b7.
Wow, Robert, that's an essential detail, because otherwise, yeah, White would just be winning. He plays rook to b7 anyway, and we're going to see this appear on the board. No need to even show it. Magnus is going to take on c3 next. He can pre-move that. No matter where the White king goes, he needs to regain the material balance here. Knight takes c3. You're really lucky that you're pinning and winning back the pawn, but the White king will start activating now. It's still far from safe here for Black. So Magnus has landed a nice trick. I'm surprised he didn't take on c3 automatically here, Robert. Looks far juicier, looks far more important than the g3 pawn, the double one over there. And now I'm expecting the White king to wander forward. The Black king stuck on the back rank. Another factor you mentioned could well be in a mating net. If White gets 2 more moves, 3 more moves, a king on d6, knight on e6, that would be checkmate. So watch out, Magnus Carlsen.
This doesn't look that easy. I'm looking at the evaluation bar. Oh, it's equal. It's just a draw. No, this isn't just a draw. With optimal play, Magnus could hold this. But David, the carpet is rolled out for this White king. The h7 pawn is loose. And then these double g pawns can strike. And actually having 2 g pawns can be valuable. Rooks, as I said, they like to stop pass pawns from behind. But when you have 2 of them, you can't quite get there in time in many positions. So knight to a4, I would push this pawn to b3, just keep that pawn on a defended square while attacking the knight, and later, White can go after Black's loose pawns. I think that there are very good winning chances for Alireza.
Fantastic winning chances. The Black Knight attacked. I'm slightly surprised I don't see the kind of circuit for this knight. I don't see where it really wants to go to. Magnus, beautiful move, Robert. Tactics galore.
What a find. He stopped the infiltration of the king, and he's trying to park his rook on e4 with check to win this knight. Give a knight to get a knight. David, Magnus Carlsen, just when I was saying it looked like he was in some danger, he finds a lovely response. Now his knight is free to get back in the game. It continues. I don't think that there's a draw in the near future available to Magnus, and he's down to 1 minute and now 23, 22 seconds. He's in time trouble.
Big time trouble, position trouble. And this is where we talk about in the endgame active versus passive pieces. Black's king is purely passive. Look how dominant White's are. Centralized knight, controlling 8 squares for White. The Black knight sidelined, the White rook cutting off the 7th rank. The kill zone for the Black king. Yeah, still some trouble. Magnus has done everything perfectly since he arrived in this difficult endgame to kind of guide this game towards safety. But still, how frustrating is that? You play so many kind of incredible moves, and you're still defending. You're still on the back foot. Knight c3. I saw the bar rise slightly there, Robert. Is it just the fact that White can, again, for what feels like the millionth time right now, go up a pawn? Rook takes h7.
Yeah, rook takes h7 is hanging, and it can be captured. I was wondering if Black is desperately trying to trade off the knights. Knight e2, it looks clumsy. You're sort of walking into a pin, but I believe that Black can get away with it. So that might be Magnus's hope in this position. I think that Alireza would be well advised to keep some of these pieces on the board, but you have to be extra careful for Magnus Carlsen because in the back of your mind, you're thinking, what trades can I allow? If you are down a pawn, trades usually favor the side with the extra material. And Alireza, he's about to join Magnus in the 1 minute club. It's getting to a bullet scramble soon.
Yeah, it's incoming, guaranteed the scramble. He doesn't play your knight e2 move. I really love that one. He's trying to go behind the passed pawns, as you also indicated. Normally good classical chess wisdom, but you're sidelining your rook. It's a bit of a lengthy process here. And White's front g-pawn, the forerunner there, can start sprinting up the board. I'm not sure whether now on the next few turns it's also tempting to threaten mate in one. Why not? Just in case the opponent's pre-moved. King to e6. The opposition, there we go. He plays it. Big background checkmate. The black king has to dodge that opposition. It was stared down, but it's walking into the firing line here, Robert. The white knight is coming into f5. This looks super scary for that black monarch.
And it's apparently a huge mistake. And knight f5, it says that white is a pawn to the good and has a big advantage here. And knight f5 threatens checkmate once more. The black king can step aside, but after rook g7 check, I think the black king will be forced in the corner. So this is good play from Magnus Carlsen. When you're worried about your king safety, you prefer to be in the center of the board, but also some nice play from Alireza Firouzja. He's going after the weaknesses.
He's really playing so well today, Alireza. This is alpha Alireza for sure. A question mark attached to Magnus's move. This was the only way to keep the D pawn intact, but there we go. Blue arrow again. Push him, baby. Pawn to g4. White's passed pawns here are going to win this game. He starts that journey, Robert. He's so close now, Alireza. You can see him bobbing up and down on the camera. The momentum is all on his side. He's in that flow state. Pawn to g5, keep pushing, and it looks winning for White now.
Where's Yasser Sarah? And when you need him, push him, baby. Let's go and get a new queen. He first steps back with the knight, and I'm wondering, I thought black would have tried to kick the rook out of there. Instead, he gives up the d5 pawn. Well, it could be captured with check, but why not take with the knight? The e4 knight is loose. David, this is getting out of control for Magnus Carlsen.
Out of control. His only hope is the clock. It's 17 seconds against 40 seconds. There aren't that many pawns remaining, so if Magnus can somehow sacrifice the black knight for all his pawns, he can draw, but knight c3, a winning move, Robert. Double attack. Magnus.
And you saw Magnus, he just flew back in his chair, and Alireza Firouzja has soared to a 2-0 lead in this match. This has been one-sided, and when we typically talk about one-sided matches, it's for the world number one. But Alireza Firouzja, he may be fulfilling his promise before our eyes. He is just dominating Magnus Carlsen.
Wow, it's one-way traffic right now. Magnus was always on the back foot. We said he was